My father was dying in the ICU on the 4th floor of Northwestern Memorial when an old woman in the room next door slowly rolled her wheelchair toward me and whispered, "If you still can drive home tonight." I thought she was confused. My husband was on his way to the hospital with dinner and fresh clothes. And the doctors kept saying we just had to wait. But the way that woman looked at me, cold, urgent, almost frightened, made my stomach tighten. 2 hours later, I unlocked my front door and realized someone had already been inside my house before me. Some stories ask you to really listen. Before we begin, drop a quick comment. What are you doing right now while you're here? Cooking, driving, working, or just taking a moment for yourself? Your presence truly matters. Quick note. This story weaves fictional elements with real experiences to strengthen the message. What matters most is the lesson it carries. There are things you don't realize you've lost until you sit alone in silence long enough. I am 30 years old, and for 5 years I believed my husband when he told me I wasn't practical enough to understand money. I sat on a plastic hospital chair outside my father's ICU room on the 4th floor of Northwestern Memorial River. North Tower. Yellow fluorescent light humming overhead. Lukewarm coffee going cold in my hand, and stared through the glass pane at the ventilator rising and falling with mechanical precision. My father. Wendell Lockwood. 64. Professor of medicine at Northwestern. Lay motionless beneath sterile white sheets. The stroke had taken him at his office desk Monday morning. Massive ischemic event. The neurologist said. Left hemisphere compromised. They used words like significant damage and uncertain prognosis and wait and see. Desmond had handled all the questions. Desmond always handled the questions. I held the coffee cup and realized I didn't know my father's lawyer's name. The thought arrived quietly without ceremony. Just a small gap where knowledge should have been. I tried to reconstruct the information Dad had mentioned the firm once. Maybe twice over holiday dinners. But the specific name dissolved every time I reached for it. Desmond would know. Desmond handled those things. I tried another question. How much is my father's company worth? I didn't know. Where is his will kept? I didn't know who should I call if the hospital needs authorization for surgical intervention. I looked down at my phone. Desmond's name sat at the top of my recent calls list 17 times in the past 6 hours. Every decision, every form, every conversation with the medical team had been filtered through him first. He would arrive soon with dinner. Something healthy he'd said on the last call because hospital cafeteria food would make me feel worse. He was probably right. He was always right about those things. The air smelled like antiseptic and floor wax and something else I couldn't name, the particular scent of waiting maybe, or fear rendered institutional. I shifted on the plastic chair. The fabric of my grey wool dress caught on the seat's rough edge. When did I stop knowing the answers to my own life? I used to be capable. I remember being capable. I graduated summa cum laude from University of Chicago with a degree in economics. Not literature. Not art. History. Economics. I understood compound interest and equity structures and risk assessment. And yet somewhere in the past 5 years, I had learned to preface every practical question with the same phrase. I should ask Desmond. I used to think that was care. I didn't have another name for it yet. The fluorescent light above me buzzed. A nurse walked past pushing a medication cartwheel squeaking against linoleum. I could hear someone's television 3 rooms down. Volume too loud. Playing the evening news. The ventilator hissed and clicked through the glass. Dad's chest rose. Dad's chest fell. The machine breathed for him because his brain couldn't remember how. I stood up. The coffee had gone completely cold. I walked it to the small kitchenette at the end of the hallway and poured it down the sink, watching brown liquid swirl against stainless steel. When I turned back toward Dad's room, I noticed the doorway to room 412 was open about 6 in, and a woman sat in a wheelchair just inside the threshold. She was watching me. In room 412. A woman in her mid-70s sat in a wheelchair by the door. Pale grey eyes sharp as winter glass. White hair pulled back in a loose bun. Hospital gown hanging off thin shoulders. Later, I would learn her name was Iris Peaton. That she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. That she had maybe 3 weeks left and spent them watching the hallway like she'd been assigned guard duty. But in that moment, she was just a stranger positioned oddly. Deliberately. As if she'd been waiting. Our eyes met. She lifted one finger. Small gesture. Barely a movement. And flicked it toward herself. Come here. I hesitated. Hospital etiquette said you didn't approach other patients uninvited. But something about the precision of that gesture made me walk over anyway. I stopped just outside her doorway. I'm sorry. I said quietly. Do I know you? She looked at me for a long time. Those grey eyes moved across my face with the focus of someone conducting an assessment. Then she leaned forward slightly. Voice barely above a whisper. If you can, she said. Drive home tonight. I blinked. I'm sorry. Drive home tonight, she repeated. Same tone. Same deliberate cadence. Not advice, gesturing vaguely toward the ICU room down the hall. He just had a stroke. I can't leave him. Iris, though I didn't know her name yet, studied my face for 3 more seconds. Then she rolled her wheelchair backwards 6 in. Just enough to retreat into her room and turned her gaze away. The conversation was over. I stood there feeling foolish. The woman was clearly medicated. Confused. Maybe seeing someone else when she looked at me. I should have felt sympathy. Instead, I felt cold. You learn a person's footsteps after 5 years. The rhythm. The weight. The particular way they move through space. You learn the sound of their keys in the door. The specific pattern of their knock. The cadence of their breathing when they sleep beside you. You learn these things without trying because proximity teaches you whether you want the education or not. I walked back toward my father's room and sat down on the plastic chair. The hallway settled back into its mechanical rhythm. Distant monitors beeping. Elevator chiming somewhere around the corner. The ventilator steady hiss through glass. Everything exactly where it should be. Except the old woman's words wouldn't leave. If you can drive home tonight. I looked down at my camel leather handbag sitting beside the chair. A birthday gift from Desmond last year. Beautiful Italian craftsmanship cost more than my first car. I didn't know why I was looking at it. Perhaps because the old woman had said something I couldn't entirely push out of my mind. Something that felt like a warning I didn't yet understand. The elevator chimed again. Closer this time. I heard footsteps steady. Confident the particular rhythm I'd learned 5 years ago coming down the hallway toward me. Desmond Ashford. 37. My husband of 5 years. Stepped off the elevator in his navy suit. Every detail perfect. Every word chosen. I recognized the footsteps before I saw him. The confident stride leather soles against linoleum. The particular rhythm I'd learned to predict. He turned the corner carrying a brown paper bag from the organic place on Orleans Street. Ty still nodded despite the late-hour hair neatly combed. He looked like exactly what he was, the kind of man who handled emergencies with competence. Who stepped into crisis and made it manageable. He saw me and his face softened into concern. You've had a long day, he said. Setting the bag down and pulling me into an embrace. His hand rubbed slow circles on my back. I'm here now. Have you eaten? Did you drink water? I had coffee. I said into his shoulder. That's not water. He released me and handed over the paper bag. Turkey sandwich. No mayo like you prefer. Coconut water. I got you the unsweetened kind. He was right. I did prefer it that way. He remembered these things. Thank you. I said. He nodded once. Then turned toward Dad's room. Through the glass. I could see the attending physician checking monitors. Desmond knocked lightly on the doorframe. Professional courtesy, and stepped inside. I watched him shake the doctor's hand. Introduce himself. Ask questions with the kind of measured authority that made people take him seriously. He took notes on his phone. He asked about prognosis, timeline, intervention options, neurological assessment protocols. The doctor answered every question. Desmond nodded at appropriate intervals. His expression grave but composed. He looked back at me once through the glass and gave a small reassuring smile. Everything under control. Everything being handled. I sat back down on the plastic chair and unwrapped the sandwich. Turkey. Lettuce. Tomato. Whole grain bread. No mayo. Exactly what I would have ordered if he'd asked. Except he hadn't asked. He'd just known. After 5 years. You learn each other that way. Or maybe you just learn the performance. That thought arrived without invitation. I bit into the sandwich and chewed mechanically. Desmond stayed in the room for another 10 minutes. Then emerged with the doctor still talking. They stood in the hallway discussing something technical. Cerebral edema. Intracranial pressure. Pharmaceutical intervention strategies. Desmond asked if the hospital had consulted with the stroke specialist at Rush. The doctor said they had. Desmond suggested a second opinion anyway. Said he'd make some calls. He was being the perfect husband. The competent one. The one who stepped in when I couldn't think straight. You should go home and sleep, he said when the doctor finally left. I can stay tonight. You look exhausted. I'm fine, I said. You're not fine. You've been here since this morning. He touched my shoulder. Have you rested at all? Did you call your office? I nodded. I called. They said take the week. Good. He squeezed my shoulder once. I'm going to grab coffee from the cafeteria. Do you want anything? No. Thank you. He walked toward the elevator. I watched him go. Counted his footsteps. And then sat very still. He had asked if I ate. If I drank water. If I rested. If I called my office. He had not asked how I was feeling. 5 years. It took me 5 years to notice that difference. I stood up and walked down the hallway. Past the kitchenette. Past the nurse's station. Past the room where someone's television still played too loud. Room 412's door stood open about 6 in. Iris sat in the same position. Wheelchair angled toward the hallway. Grey eyes tracking movement. She saw me and lifted one finger. The same gesture as before. Come here. I looked back toward the elevator. Desmond was gone. I stepped into room 412. The room smelled like antiseptic and something floral, lavender maybe, or lilac. Iris wheeled herself back slightly to make space. Then reached into the blanket folded across her lap and pulled out something small. A voice recorder. The kind lawyers use for depositions. Black plastic casing. Red record button. She pressed it into my hand without speaking. What is this? I whispered. Last night. Iris said. Voice low and steady. Your husband stood out on the balcony at the end of this hallway talking on the phone. My room is right next to it. The wall is thin. I heard through it. My heart started beating faster. What did you hear? He was talking about pulling the plug on your father. Saying it needs to be done before the weekend. The floor tilted slightly. I gripped the recorder. You don't know that. I said you don't know what you heard. He could have been. I know what I heard. Iris's eyes didn't blink. I'm 74 years old. I have 3 weeks left. Maybe less. I don't have time to lie to strangers in hospital hallways. I stared at her. I know you won't believe me right away. She continued. But before you go home tonight, check that handbag thoroughly. She pointed one thin finger toward the hallway. Toward the camel leather bag sitting beside my chair. Rip open the inner lining. Why would I just do it? Her voice was flat. Final. Check the lining. Then decide if I'm confused. She wheeled herself backwards 6 in the same retreat as before and turned her face toward the window. The conversation was over. I stood there holding the recorder. It was cold in my palm. Smaller than a lighter. Heavier than the entire world. Why are you helping me? I asked. Iris didn't turn around. Because I spent 42 years not helping someone who needed it. I'm not doing that again. I walked out of room 412 with the recorder clenched in my fist. The hallway looked exactly the same. Yellow fluorescent light linoleum floor. Mechanical hum of ventilators and monitors. But the air felt different. Thinner. Maybe colder. I sat back down on the plastic chair beside Dad's door and stared at the camel leather handbag. Last year's birthday gift from Desmond bought at a boutique on the Magnificent Mile. He'd said the color matched my eyes. I'd loved it. Used it every day since. I slipped the recorder into my coat pocket and picked up the handbag. Rip open the inner lining. The elevator chimed. Desmond would be coming back any second with his coffee. His competence. His perfectly measured concern. I stood up and walked quickly toward the restroom at the end of the hall, handbag clutched against my chest. I locked the door from the inside. I sat down on the cold tile floor with the handbag in my lap. The restroom smelled like industrial cleaner and something faintly metallic. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. I locked the door and for a moment just sat there breathing. Then I tore at the fabric lining. The interior silk came apart easily once I found the seam. My fingers were shaking but precise, pulling thread loose, working the fabric free from its stitching. The lining peeled back like skin underneath, pressed flat against the leather base. I found it an Apple AirTag coin-sized white plastic stitched into the seam with thread that matched the bag's camel color exactly. I pulled it free and held it in my palm. It was very light. Almost nothing. The kind of thing you could slip into a bag or a coat pocket or a child's backpack to track if they got lost. Perfectly innocent technology. Perfectly legal purchase. Perfectly illegal use. Illinois. Criminal Code 720 ILCS 521-2.5. Unauthorized electronic tracking constitutes stalking. I knew that. I had a degree in economics. But I'd taken enough law electives to understand the basics. If someone tracks your location without consent, it's a crime. I sat on the bathroom floor holding the evidence and tried to remember when the handbag had become mine. Last year. February. My birthday. Desmond had taken me to a boutique on the Magnificent Mile. Told me to pick anything I wanted. I'd chosen this one because the leather was soft and the color reminded me of autumn. He'd smiled and said it matched my eyes perfectly. Had he stitched the AirTag in before giving it to me? Or after, while I slept one night? I turned the device over in my palm. The back showed an engraved logo. Not Apple's. A company name I didn't recognize. Registered under an LLC to conceal ownership probably. That's what people did when they wanted to hide who was tracking whom. The memories came in waves. Not dramatic. Just small moments that suddenly made terrible sense. Every time I went somewhere without telling him beforehand, he would call at the exact moment I arrived. At my college friend's apartment for lunch. At the bookstore on Clark Street. At Dad's office downtown. I'd thought it was intuition. Thought it was the way couples became synchronized after years together. Thought it meant he was thinking about me. I was just thinking about you. He'd say when I answered. Where are you? And I'd tell him every single time I'd tell him. Smiling because it felt like connection. It wasn't intuition. It wasn't care. He knew because he was tracking me. I thought about the coffee meeting 3 months ago with my former thesis advisor. Dr. Monroe. Who'd asked if I wanted to teach a seminar at Chicago next fall. I'd said I needed to think about it. That night at dinner, Desmond had mentioned casually that the university was far from our apartment. That the commute would be exhausting. That maybe it wasn't the right timing. I'd agreed it had seemed reasonable. He'd known about the meeting because he'd watched me drive to campus on his phone. I thought about the friend I'd slowly stopped seeing, Rachel from undergrad, who lived in Wicker Park. Every time I made plans with her, Desmond would call during lunch saying he'd had a terrible day, asking if I could come home early. Eventually, I stopped making the plans. It had seemed like I was being considerate. He'd time those calls by watching the AirTag location. I thought about the yoga class I'd signed up for 2 years ago and attended exactly 3 times before Desmond mentioned it. Conflicted with his work dinners. That he really needed me there for networking. I'd cancelled the membership. It had seemed like being supportive. He'd known my schedule because he'd tracked every movement. 5 years. 5 years of surveillance disguised as devotion. I sat on the cold tile and felt something shift inside my chest. Not panic. Not fear. Something colder and sharper. I pulled out my phone and Googled Illinois stalking law. Skimmed the statute. Unauthorized electronic tracking, class 4 felony, 1 to 3 years imprisonment. But only if the victim filed charges. Only if the victim had evidence. Only if the victim was willing to burn down her entire life to prove her husband was a criminal. I looked at the AirTag in my palm. I could confront him. Walk out there right now. Hold it up. Demand explanation. Watch him scramble for justification. Watch him tell me it was for my safety. For security, because the city was dangerous and he worried about me. Watch him make it sound reasonable until I started doubting my own anger. Or I could remove it. Throw it in the trash. Cut off his access. Reclaim my privacy. Or I stood up and opened the first aid kit mounted on the wall. Inside, bandages. Antiseptic wipes. Medical tape. A small sewing kit for torn clothing. I pulled out the needle and thread. My hands didn't shake as I threaded the needle. If I confronted him, he would know I knew. If I removed it, he would know I knew. Either way, he would adjust. Adapt. Find new methods. Install new tools. Men like Desmond. Men who spent 5 years building invisible cages didn't stop when caught. They just got better at hiding. But if I stitched it back exactly where it was, if I walked out of this restroom with the bag looking untouched, he would think his secret was still safe. He would keep using it. Keep relying on it. Keep assuming I was the woman who didn't notice, who didn't question, who didn't understand technology well enough to find a tracker in her birthday gift. And while he watched me on his phone, I could watch him. I positioned the AirTag back into the lining precisely where it had been. Matched the thread color. Reconstructed the stitching with careful, even spacing. My hands were steady. The economics degree hadn't taught me to sew, but 5 years of pretending to be someone I wasn't had taught me plenty about performance. I finished the final stitch. Knotted it twice. Bit the thread clean. The lining looked perfect. Untouched. The kind of detail work that would pass inspection from someone who'd installed it himself. I stood up and looked in the mirror above the sink. The woman looking back had the same brown hair. Same face. Same grey wool dress. But her eyes were calculating something. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't recognize myself. Strangely enough, I didn't find it terrifying. I picked up the handbag, slipped the voice recorder deeper into my coat pocket, and unlocked the restroom door. I walked back down the hallway toward my father's room. The handbag felt heavier now, though nothing about its weight had changed. Desmond sat in the corner chair with his eyes closed, head tilted back, navy jacket folded over his lap. The ventilator hissed its steady rhythm. I sat down across from him and watched them both. The two most important men in my life. While the AirTag in my birthday gift tracked my location on Desmond's phone. I couldn't sleep. The chair was uncomfortable. But that wasn't why. I sat listening to the ventilator. The distant monitors. The occasional footsteps of night shift nurses. My mind was mapping something I didn't know I was capable of making on my own. If one thing is a lie, then everything else might be too. Desmond woke around 3 a.m. Stretched. Asked if I needed anything. I said no. He checked his phone, probably confirming my location, and closed his eyes again. Maybe he wasn't even tired. Maybe he'd learned that sleeping men don't get questioned. I looked at my father. His face was slack, motionless, eyes closed, jaw relaxed. Machines doing the work his body couldn't remember. At 5 a.m., in the grey darkness before dawn, I reached over and took his hand. His fingers tightened just once. Barely perceptible. The kind of movement you could dismiss as reflex. But I felt it. Deliberate. Controlled. A message. I squeezed back gently and whispered, "I know." His hand relaxed. No further movement. Nothing Desmond could see from the corner. But Dad had heard me. He was aware. He'd been aware this entire time. Listening to everything. Unable to move or speak. But conscious underneath the paralysis. I sat back and looked at Desmond. Still sleeping with his phone on his chest. My father knew. He'd squeezed my hand because he understood something wanted me to know he was still here. And if he could hear, he'd heard Desmond's phone conversation on the balcony, the one Iris overheard through the thin wall, pulling the plug before the weekend. Dawn came slowly, grey light filtering through the window, turning the room from black to charcoal to pale institutional beige. At 6 a.m., I pulled out my phone and typed a text to Desmond, heading home to grab some clean clothes. Taking the L train. It's faster. Stay with Dad. I hit send and watched his phone light up. He stirred. Read the message. Typed back immediately. Be safe. Text when you get there. I stood up. Kissed my father's forehead. And walked out. Desmond didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. He had the AirTag. The ground floor lobby of a hospital at 7 in the morning is the one place in Chicago where no one looks at anyone else. Everyone is arriving or leaving carrying their own ghosts. I stood near the elevator bank and scanned for what I needed. A young man stood near the entrance with a massive courier backpack, phone in hand, filming himself. Delivery driver, early shift. He was talking to his camera about the cold, about his route, about needing better gloves. A morning TikTok vlog. Tyler Brennan. 24H, hair messy. Under a knit cap. Wearing a puffer jacket with his company logo stitched on the chest. He lowered the phone when I approached. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need help with something." He looked at me, assessing whether this was a scam or genuine need. "Yeah." I pulled two $20 bills from my wallet and held them out. "I need this bag delivered to this address." I showed him a coffee shop location on my phone. Lincoln Square. North Side. Opposite direction from where I was actually going. $40 cash. No questions. He stared at the money. Then the handbag. Then my face. Whatever he saw there made him nod. "Yeah. Okay. I got you." I handed him the bag and cash. He stuffed both into his backpack without another word, lifted his phone to continue filming, and walked toward the parking lot. I watched him climb onto a bike with the backpack secured across his shoulders. Watched him pedal north. I slipped out the side exit and hailed a taxi. Lincoln Park. I told the driver. Burling Street. The taxi merged onto Lakeshore Drive. Lake Michigan lay to my left. Grey and flat under a winter sky that promised snow. I pulled out my phone and opened the Find My app. I typed in my Apple ID and watched the map populate. A blue dot appeared moving north. The AirTag. My handbag. Tyler Brennan on his bike pedaling toward Lincoln Square with no idea he was carrying a tracking device. creating a false trail that showed me heading in the exact opposite direction from where I actually was. I was going somewhere where absolutely no one knew where I was for the first time in 5 years. It felt terrifying, and it felt like the closest thing to freedom I had ever known. The driver took Fullerton West. Turned onto tree-lined streets where January had stripped the leaves but left bare branches elegant against grey sky. Old brownstones. Historic mansions. The kind of neighborhood where people invested in architecture and privacy. He pulled up in front of the house at 8:15 a.m. 3 stories. Brick facade. Original 1920s details preserved through renovation. Desmond had bought it 2 years after we married. Said it was an investment. Said we'd raise children here someday. The mortgage was in his name only because my credit was recovering from student loans. That's what he'd said. I'd believed him. I paid the driver cash and stepped onto the sidewalk. The house stood there $3.2 million heavy with 5 years of carefully controlled silences. I checked the time. 8:15 a.m. Desmond wouldn't leave the hospital for at least 2 hours. He thought I was on the L train. Thought the AirTag was showing my real location. Moving north through the city. I walked up the front steps and unlocked the door with my key. Inside. The house was quiet. In that distinct way. A house is only quiet when you look at it for the first time. Knowing it is no longer your home. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The house smelled like it always did. Lavender from the diffuser Desmond kept in the entryway. Leather from the furniture. Something faintly citrus from whatever cleaning service came on Thursdays. Everything exactly where it should be. Perfectly maintained. Perfectly controlled. I walked straight to Desmond's office. The door was locked. But I knew where he kept the spare key behind the framed photo of us on our wedding day. The one where I looked happy because I didn't know yet what I'd married. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. His desk was immaculate. Laptop closed. Papers organized in labeled folders. Pens arranged by color. The performance of order. I opened the bottom drawer. The one he always kept locked when I was home. Inside a burner phone. Android. Not iPhone. Black plastic case. Generic. I picked it up and pressed the power button. It asked for a PIN. I tried my birthday October 15th. 1992. The screen unlocked. The messages loaded. I scrolled back 6 years before we met, before he ever spoke to me at that coffee shop on Michigan Avenue where he'd smiled and asked if the seat next to me was taken. The first message thread made my stomach drop. The girl looks easy. Is her dad rich? Reply, loaded and she's lonely. Lacks confidence. The easiest kind. I sat down in his desk chair because my legs stopped working. He had researched me. Targeted me a full year before we ever met. The coffee shop wasn't chance. The charming conversation wasn't spontaneous. Every word. Every smile. Every carefully constructed moment of our entire relationship had been premeditated fraud. I kept scrolling. Another message thread. Recent contact saved with a heart emoji. The messages were brief, clinical. Tomorrow morning. Are you sure? I increased the dosage in his 4-line this morning. No one will suspect a thing. I took a screenshot. Then another. Then I opened the contact details and saw the name hidden behind the heart. Celeste Harrington. ICU head nurse. The woman managing my father's care. The woman Desmond had positioned there. Corrupted there. Weaponized there. Warfare and poisoning. Attempted murder under Illinois Criminal Code 720 ILCS 5-8-4. Conspiracy. Premeditation. Everything documented on a device Desmond thought was hidden. I photographed everything. Placed everything back exactly as it was and left the office without taking a single thing. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom. The wardrobe had a full-length mirror. I'd looked in it every morning for 3 years. I pulled it aside now and found the wall safe. Desmond thought I didn't know existed. I'd seen him open it once late at night when he thought I was asleep. The combination was simple. My father's birthday. April 17th. 58. The safe clicked open inside 2 manila envelopes. I pulled them both out and sat on the bedroom floor. The first envelope contained my father's original will. Notarized, dated 5 years ago. Everything left to me. The company. The Lincoln Park properties. The investment account's estimated total value. $28 million. Clean. Legal. Exactly what Dad had told me when he drafted it. The second envelope made me stop breathing. Another will. Same assets. Different beneficiary. Everything transferred to Desmond Ashford in the event of Wendell Lockwood's death. The signature was shaky wrong. Nothing like my father's actual handwriting. Dated 3 days ago. January 11th. 2023. 2 days after Dad's stroke. 2 witnesses. Preston Lockwood and someone named Jay Morrison. Preston Lockwood. Dad's brother. My uncle. Class 3. Felony under Illinois law. 720 ILCS 517-3 forgery of a will. 1 to 5 years imprisonment. But only if anyone ever found out. Only if my father died and this version got filed with probate court instead of the real one. Only if I didn't discover it first. I photographed both documents. Put them back in the safe. Closed it. Repositioned the mirror. Walked downstairs. My hands were steady. My breathing was controlled. Some part of my brain had shifted into pure documentation mode. Collect evidence. Preserve chain of custody. Don't contaminate the scene. He targeted me a full year before we ever met. This was never love. It was never even real. I stepped onto the front porch at 9:15 a.m. with my car keys in hand. The morning air was cold. Sharp. The kind of January cold that cuts through fabric. My Honda CR-V sat parked at the curb where I'd left it Monday morning. Silver. 4 years old. Perfectly maintained. The burner phone in my coat pocket vibrated. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. New text message. Unsaved number. It's done. The bitch's brake lines are cut. If she drives her car back, she won't make it past Lakeshore Drive. I stood on those front steps. Car keys in my hand. Staring at the vehicle I drove every single day. 3M away. Engine perfectly tuned. Oil changed on schedule. Brake lines severed by someone Desmond hired to kill me. If I hadn't diverted the AirTag, I would have driven that car back to the hospital. I would have merged onto Lakeshore Drive doing 50 miles per hour. I would have pressed the brake pedal and felt nothing. No resistance. No stop. Just acceleration into whatever was in front of me. Concrete barrier. Another car. The grey water of Lake Michigan. He doesn't just want the money. He wants me dead. I could call 911. Report the sabotage. Get police here within minutes. But calling now would alert Desmond. I'd breached his office. Found his evidence. Discovered his plan. And my father was still in that hospital bed with Celeste Harrington controlling his medication. Desmond standing guard and a ventilator plug someone wanted pulled before the weekend. I dropped the car keys back into my pocket. Walked to the corner. And hailed a taxi. The driver pulled up. I climbed in and gave him an address I hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years. I pulled out my personal phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't dared look at in that long. The friend Desmond convinced me I'd had a falling out with the person who'd stopped calling after I made excuses one too many times. The relationship he'd systematically dismantled through isolation disguised as conflict resolution. Briar Finch. Chicago PD detective. My college roommate. The woman I'd ghosted because Desmond said she didn't respect our marriage. The taxi turned on to Fullerton. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Hello. Briar Finch. 30 years old. Contract lawyer. My best friend since college. The person Desmond convinced me I'd had a falling out with 3 years ago over something I could never quite remember clearly when I tried to reconstruct it later. Her voice sounded exactly the same. There was a second of stunned silence when she heard my voice. Then everything came pouring out. "Oh my God," Briar said. "Are you okay? I've tried calling you a dozen times. Your husband kept saying you were busy, that you'd call back. But you never." "I need help," I said. The taxi turned left onto a side street. The driver wasn't listening or pretended not to. "I need help right now. And I don't know who else to call." "What happened?" I laid it out. Facts first. No emotion. The way you'd present evidence to a jury. AirTag tracking device stitched into my handbag with matching thread. Burner phone in Desmond's locked office with 6-year message history proving he researched and targeted me a year before we met. Text messages from ICU head nurse Celeste Harrington detailing how she increased warfare and dosage in my father's 4-line. Forged will dated 3 days after Dad's stroke, transferring $28 million in assets to Desmond, witnessed by my uncle Preston Lockwood. And 15 minutes ago, a text on the burner phone confirming someone had cut my car's brake lines. Briar didn't interrupt. Didn't ask questions. Just listened with the kind of focus lawyers develop when intake interviews determine whether a case is viable. When I finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. "Where are you right now?" she asked. "In a taxi. Heading away from the house. I don't know where I'm going yet. Is your father still at Northwestern Memorial?" "Yes. Desmond is with him. And the nurse. Celeste. She's the one managing his care." "Okay." Briar's voice shifted into the tone I remembered from law school. The one she used when mapping strategy. "Listen to me carefully. Do not go back to that hospital yet. Do not call your husband. Do not touch anything else in that house. You've already contaminated potential evidence by photographing it. But that's done now. What matters is what happens next. What do I do? You need a detective from the Chicago PD. Someone who specializes in financial elder abuse and conspiracy cases. And I know exactly who to call." The taxi stopped at a red light. I watched people cross the intersection. Strangers carrying coffee. Checking phones. Living normal Tuesday mornings where their husbands weren't trying to murder them and their fathers. "There's something else you need to know," Briar said slowly. 4 years ago, your husband came to my office. I went very still. "What?" He scheduled a consultation. Said he had questions about Illinois estate law. I didn't think anything of it at the time. People ask me about probate issues all the time. But he asked very specific questions. How to contest a will. Power of attorney procedures. The legal definitions of cognitive incapacitation. When someone can be declared legally incompetent to make financial decisions. The pieces clicked into place. Illinois Conspiracy Statute 720 ILCS 58-2. Overt act in furtherance of criminal objective. Desmond hadn't just planned this in the abstract. He'd researched the legal mechanisms 4 years in advance. Before Dad got sick. Before the stroke. Before any of it. I didn't get it. Then. Briar continued. He was charming. Professional. Said he was helping a family member plan their estate. I gave him the information and forgot about it. But then 6 months later. You started pulling away. Canceling plans. Making excuses. And every time I called, Desmond would answer and say you were in the shower or tired or dealing with a headache. Eventually, you stopped returning my messages entirely. He told me we had a fight. I said quietly. About something you said at dinner. I can't even remember what it was supposed to be now. But he said you disrespected our marriage and I needed to set boundaries. We never fought. Briar said. You just disappeared. The isolation. Systematic. Methodical. Cut off the friend who knew Illinois estate law. The friend who might recognize the questions he was asking. The friend who might warn me. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Don't." Briar's voice was firm. "Don't apologize for what he did. Just tell me. Are you safe right now?" "I think so. He doesn't know I found anything yet. The AirTag is on a delivery driver's bike heading north. Desmond thinks I'm on the L train going home." "Smart." I heard her typing on a keyboard. "Okay. I'm texting someone right now. Detective with Chicago PD Financial Crimes and Elder Abuse Unit. I've worked with him on guardianship fraud cases. He's good. He's fast. And he'll believe you." "How do you know?" "Because he's been investigating your uncle for 3 weeks." The taxi driver turned on to Armitage. I gripped the phone. "What?" "Preston Lockwood. Your father's brother." The detective got a tip from someone at a nursing home in Evanston. Suspicious financial activity. Possible exploitation. He's been building a case. And if Preston witnessed a forged will for your husband that connects 2 separate conspiracies. She didn't hesitate for a single second. "I'm sending you an address right now," Briar said. Small coffee shop in Logan Square. Low foot traffic. Far from the hospital. Far from your house. Far from anywhere Desmond would think to look. Meet the detective there. His name is. She paused. Reading from her screen. Detective Garrett Townsend. He'll be there in 30 minutes. My phone buzzed. Text from Briar. Address in Logan Square. And you need to hear what he's about to tell you about your father. Briar added. Because if I'm right about the timeline, your dad knew someone was coming after him and has been trying to protect you this entire time. I gave the taxi driver the new address. He nodded and turned west. The cafe was tucked into a quiet side street in Logan Square. The kind of place with mismatched wooden tables and a chalkboard menu written in careful script. Low foot traffic on a Tuesday morning. 2 other customers both reading newspapers. Both ignoring everyone else. The detective sat in the furthest corner table back to the wall facing the entrance. He saw me the moment I walked in. Briar arrived 30 seconds after I did. Slightly out of breath. She hugged me without asking permission. Then gestured toward the man at the corner table. "That's Garrett." We walked over together. He stood when we approached, tall mid-40s grey starting at his temples, wearing a dark suit that looked comfortable rather than formal. The kind of person who'd spent enough years in law enforcement to recognize when someone was about to fall apart. "You must be Margot," he said, extending his hand. "Detective Garrett Townsend. Chicago PD. Financial Crimes and Elder Abuse." His handshake was firm but brief. We sat down. The cafe smelled like coffee and cinnamon. Something baking in the back. Normal Tuesday morning smells. The world continuing around us while mine was ending. "Your father contacted me 8 days before he was admitted to Northwestern Memorial," Garrett said without preamble. "January 5th. He called the precinct, directly asked for someone who specialized in elder financial exploitation cases. Said he needed to speak to someone immediately. I set my coffee down. What? He discovered highly irregular transactions in the company accounts. Clear signs your husband was siphoning funds through shell corporations and dummy invoices. Small amounts at first, escalating over the past 2 years. By the time your father found the pattern, it was close to $2 million. $2 million on top of the forged will, transferring $28 million in estate assets. Desmond hadn't just been planning to inherit everything. He'd been stealing it in advance. Your father asked me to investigate. Garrett continued. Gave me access to the company financial records. Showed me the paper trail. We started building a case under the Illinois Adult Protective Services Act 320 ILCS 20. Chicago PD has concurrent jurisdiction with state agencies on elder abuse cases. But we had a problem. What problem? We had paper evidence showing money disappearing. We had circumstantial evidence pointing to your husband. But we needed proof of direct physical action. Something that would hold up cleanly in criminal court. Not just civil forfeit. Your father was afraid if we moved too quickly, your husband would destroy evidence or disappear. Briar leaned forward. So what did he do? Garrett looked at me. He decided to bait him. Your father coordinated with his attending colleague at Northwestern Memorial, Dr. Conrad Hewitt, to stage a medical condition. Admit himself. Create a scenario where your husband would feel pressured to make his final move quickly before anyone could intervene or contest anything legally. I sat frozen coffee untouched, realizing my father had been fighting for me while I sat beside his bed, thinking I was the one protecting him. The stroke was real. Garrett clarified. The medical emergency was legitimate. But the timing, your father had been experiencing minor warning symptoms for weeks. T's transient ischemic attacks. He could have sought treatment earlier. Managed it preventatively. Instead, he waited. Documented everything. And when the major event hit, he'd already coordinated with Dr. Hewitt to position the investigation. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. Because the investigation was entirely secret. Your father feared correctly. As it turns out, that any information would leak back to your husband through the channels he controlled. You were being tracked. Your communications were monitored. If you'd known, you would have changed your behavior. And your husband would have noticed. The AirTag, the burner phone. The systematic isolation. Dad had known all of it. He'd known I was trapped and couldn't reach me directly without tipping Desmond off. So, he let himself become the target. I said quietly. Drew the attack onto himself. Yes. Garrett pulled a thin manila folder from the bag beside his chair and placed it on the table. We've been building this case for 8 days. Surveillance on your husband's movements. Financial forensics on the shell corporations. Coordination with the hospital to document any suspicious activity around your father's care. But we were moving carefully. Too carefully maybe. He opened the folder. Inside, photographs of Desmond entering and leaving buildings. Bank statements showing irregular transfers. Corporate filings for LLCs with anonymous ownership. The framework of a case that would take months to prosecute. And then Briar called me this morning. Garrett continued. And told me what you found in one unsupervised morning at your house. I pulled out my phone and laid the screenshots on the table. The burner phone messages from 6 years ago. The texts with Celeste Harrington about increasing wear and dosage. The photo of the forged will with Preston Lockwood's signature as witness. The message about cut break lines. The detective looked down at the files I had laid out and was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. What you brought me today is more than we gathered in the last 8 days. This isn't just financial exploitation anymore. This is conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Attempted murder. Forgery. And you have direct evidence of all of it. Briar was already examining the forged will photo, already building the case in her head the way lawyers do. The nurse. Celeste Harrington. She's admitting to poisoning in writing. Garrett said, pointing to the screenshot. That's attempted murder under 720 ILCS 58-4. Minimum 6 years. Maximum 30. And the person who cut your brake lines. We can trace that phone number. Identify the contractor. Flip them on your husband for a plea deal. He looked up at me. But I need to do this right. Chain of custody matters. If we want this to hold up in court, I need to process everything properly. He slid a clear evidence bag across the table. Can you hand that burner phone over to me? He asked. I need to secure a document and get a warrant signed. Once we have legal authority, we can move on all of this simultaneously. Your husband. The nurse. Your uncle. Anyone else involved? I pulled the burner phone from my coat pocket and placed it in the evidence bag. Garrett sealed it, signed the label, noted the time. Briar leaned forward, looking at the forged will photo again. How fast can you get a warrant? With active attempted murder and ongoing threat to the victim. Garrett checked his watch. 2 to 4 hours. If I push it through Cook County Emergency Protocol, Judge Marilyn Keller owes me a favor. She'll sign. Garrett sealed the evidence bag containing the burner phone and set it in his briefcase. The details you provided are more than enough for me to secure a formal search warrant from the Cook County Circuit Court. I have an established relationship with the bench for elder abuse cases. Judge Marilyn Keller has signed emergency warrants for me before when there's active threat to a victim's life. Can you use what I found as evidence? I asked. Not directly. Garrett said. You obtained this through unauthorized access to your husband's property. That would get thrown out under Fourth Amendment protections. But what you found provides probable cause for me to secure a legal search warrant. Once I have judicial authorization, everything becomes admissible evidence. Briar was reviewing the forged will photos on my phone. 2 witnesses. Preston Lockwood, your biological uncle, and someone named J. Morrison. I need to verify the second identity, but having your uncle listed is already enough to charge conspiracy and will forgery. He's claiming he witnessed your father sign this 3 days after a massive stroke. The uncle I'd called Uncle Preston since childhood, the man who'd stood beside Desmond at our wedding, and smiled. Once the warrant executes, Briar continued, we can arrest all 3 simultaneously. Your husband, the nurse, and your uncle. Coordinated take-own. No one gets advanced warning. I sat perfectly still, coffee untouched, watching the evidence I'd gathered in one morning reshape into a legal framework strong enough to hold. Garrett pulled out his laptop. The brake sabotage text let me run that number. He worked in silence for 2 minutes. The cafe's espresso machine hissed in the background. The number is registered to a Shell LLC in Delaware. Garrett said finally. Standard anonymization. But I traced the active IP logs. This phone is consistently pinging cell towers in the Oak Park area. My uncle lived in Oak Park, Kenilworth Avenue. He hired the person who cut my brake lines. I said quietly. Or he did it himself. Garrett replied. Either way, the phone placing that order is operating from his neighborhood. That's evidence. Briar leaned back. So, we have a 3-person conspiracy network. Desmond orchestrating everything. Celeste Harrington executing the poisoning from inside the hospital and Preston Lockwood handling external logistics. Forged will witness possibly the brake sabotage that satisfies all elements of Illinois conspiracy law under 720 ILCS 58-2. Garrett said. Agreement to commit criminal acts. Overt actions and furtherance. Multiple participants with defined roles. We can prove each element with the evidence you brought today. He closed the laptop. Here's what happens next. I'm going back to the precinct right now. I'll write up the warrant application attached supporting affidavit and get it in front of Judge Keller by 1:00 p.m. With active attempted murder and ongoing threat to your father's life. She'll sign. Emergency protocol allows expedited review. How fast? I asked. 2 to 4 hours from submission. So, we're looking at execution sometime between 3 and 5 p.m. today. Briar checked her watch. It's 11:30 now. By mid-afternoon, this entire operation locks down. Exactly. Garrett said. Once I have the signed warrant, I coordinate with patrol units. We hit all 3 locations simultaneously. Your house for your husband. Northwestern Memorial. ICU. For the nurse. Your uncle's residence in Oak Park. No advanced warning. Just coordinated arrests. The enormity settled over me. By tonight, Desmond would be in custody. But until then, Garrett continued, his voice very serious. I need you to go back to that hospital and act completely normal. Can you do that? The question hung in the air. I don't know. I said honestly. Your husband is still there with your father. He's waiting for you to come back from getting clean clothes. He thinks you took the L train home. He thinks the AirTag is tracking your real location. He thinks you're exactly where he expects you to be. Unaware. Compliant. The wife who doesn't notice things. And I need to keep being that person. I said. For a few more hours. If he suspects anything. If you walk in there with different body language. Different eye contact. Any change in your baseline behavior. He'll know something is wrong. Men like your husband have contingency plans. He could run. He could destroy evidence. He could do something to your father before we secure the scene. Briar reached across the table and took my hand. You've been performing for 5 years. You can perform for 4 more hours. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. Screenshots. Photos. The sealed burner phone in Garrett's briefcase. Yes. I said I can do that. Garrett stood up. I'm leaving now to file the warrant. Briar. Can you stay with her? Briar nodded. I'll put her in a taxi back to the hospital. Garrett picked up his briefcase. Paused. Looked at me one more time. Your father set this in motion 8 days ago because he knew you couldn't fight this alone. But what you did today. Walking into that house. Finding this evidence. Bringing it to me. That's what's going to end it. Not him. You. He left through the cafe's front door. I watched him disappear into a Tuesday morning that looked exactly like every other Tuesday morning. Briar checked her phone. It's 11:45. Let's get you back. What's your cover story? Snow traffic. I said automatically. Lakeshore Drive was backed up. I stopped for better coffee than the hospital cafeteria. She smiled. Good. Believable. We walked out together. She hailed a taxi. Opened the door for me. Text me the second anything feels wrong. I'll be 10 minutes away all afternoon. I climbed in and gave the driver the hospital address. The taxi merged onto Fullerton. Then turned south toward Lake Michigan. The grey water stretched flat and endless to my left. I was going back to the man who wanted me dead. And I had to smile when I saw him. The sliding glass doors of the hospital parted and I stepped back inside. The scent of antiseptic and artificial warmth identical to every other day. But today I walked in with different eyes. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked down the familiar corridor toward my father's room. Desmond was sitting in the chair beside the bed reading something on his phone. He looked up when I entered. What took so long? He asked. Not suspicious. Just mildly curious. Heavy snow traffic. I said. Setting down my coat. The roads were terrible. Lakeshore Drive was backed up for miles. He nodded satisfied and went back to his phone. Your father's stable. No changes. The doctor came by around noon. I told him you'd be back soon. Thank you. I said. And sat down in the other chair. I pulled out my own phone and pretended to scroll through messages. But I wasn't reading anything. I was watching. I sat on that hallway bench and began to observe with deliberate intent. Watching the way people watch when they already know the answer but need to prove it. The nursing station sat at the end of the hall glass window overlooking the corridor, computers visible inside. 3 nurses rotated through shifts. But one appeared more frequently than the others. Celeste Harrington. 33 years old. Head nurse with access to medication order systems. Dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Scrubs always perfectly pressed. The kind of professional competence that looked reassuring until you started tracking patterns. She appeared at the nursing station every single time my husband arrived for a visit. Not randomly. Not coincidentally. Precisely timed as if alerted. I watched it happen 3 times over the course of 90 minutes. Desmond would arrive at 1 p.m. Celeste would appear at the station at 10:05 p.m. Desmond would step out for water at 2:15 p.m. Celeste would slip into my father's room at 2:16 p.m. Stay for exactly 3 minutes. Then leave. Desmond would return to the room at 2:25 p.m. Celeste would stand at the end of the hall. Not doing anything medical. Just watching. They never spoke directly. Never made eye contact when anyone else was present. But I saw it once when Desmond walked past the nursing station on his way to the elevator. Celeste glanced up from her computer screen for exactly 1 second. A single look passed between them. It was enough. I stood up and walked to the bathroom at the end of the hall, locked the stall door, and pulled out my phone. I texted Garrett Townsend. Checked the head nurse's shift logs against my husband's visitation records for the past 3 weeks. I waited. The bathroom smelled like industrial cleaner and something faintly floral. Someone had left a coat draped over the sink. I could hear footsteps in the hallway outside, the distant beeping of monitors. The mechanical hum of hospital machinery. My phone buzzed, already on it. A 100% match. Every time your husband visited in the last 3 weeks. She was on shift. Every time he didn't visit. She requested the day off or swapped shifts. The correlation is statistically impossible without coordination. The warrant is grinding through. I stared at the message. 100%. Not 90%. Not 80%. Perfect correlation over 3 weeks. The kind of pattern that doesn't happen by accident. She wasn't just Desmond's accomplice. She was his operational partner. Real-time communication. Coordinated timing. Synchronized execution. I flushed the toilet for sound cover and walked back out to the sink. Washed my hands. Looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back looked tired. Worried. The kind of wife who'd been sitting beside her father's hospital bed for days. Running on coffee and fear. Exactly what I needed to look like. I dried my hands and stepped back into the hallway. Desmond was standing by my father's door on his phone. His back turned to me. I couldn't hear what he was saying. But his posture was tense. Shoulders tight. One hand gripping the phone a little too hard. Who was he talking to now? I walked slowly down the corridor, giving him time to finish the call before I got too close. He turned slightly. Saw me coming. And ended the conversation quickly. Just checking in with work, he said. Slipping the phone into his pocket. They're asking about the quarterly reports. I told them it could wait. You should go home and get some rest. I said. You've been here all day. I can stay tonight. He hesitated. Then nodded. Maybe you're right. I'll come back in the morning. He kissed my forehead. The same gesture he'd done 1,000 times before. Warm and reassuring and completely hollow. And walked toward the elevator. I watched him go. Watched the elevator doors close. Watched the floor indicator light descend from 4 to 3 to 2 to ground. Then I sat back down in the chair beside my father's bed and pulled out my phone. An email notification sat at the top of my screen. Send her an address I didn't recognize. A string of numbers and letters. Nothing identifiable. Subject line encrypted. I opened it. The body of the email contained a single paragraph of text that looked like random characters encoded meaningless without the key. Below it, a short note in plain English. The decryption key is the date of your very first visit to your father's corporate office. You were 7 years old. He kept the visitor log from that day in his desk drawer for 23 years. If you're reading this, you know why he needed to hide it. The sender left Northwestern Memorial 3 weeks ago and has been documenting everything since. I stared at the screen. Someone who left the hospital 3 weeks ago. Someone who'd been documenting. Someone who knew about my first visit to Dad's office when I was 7 years old. I looked at my father lying motionless on the bed. Machines breathing for him. Eyes closed. But I knew now he was listening. He'd been listening this entire time. My phone buzzed again. Different notification. Text from Briar. Garrett just called. The warrant cleared. Judge Keller signed at 2:47 p.m. Execution is set for 4:00 p.m. All 3 locations simultaneously. Are you safe? I checked the time. 3:15 p.m. 45 minutes. 45 minutes became 5 hours. The warrant execution got delayed. Something about jurisdictional coordination. About securing all 3 locations simultaneously. About making sure no one fled. Garrett texted at 6 p.m. Push to tomorrow morning. The judge wants everything airtight. Sit tight. I sat in the hospital hallway watching Desmond move in and out of my father's room performing concern. By 8 p.m. He'd gone down to the cafeteria for dinner. I sat alone with my phone. Pulling up the encrypted email Opal Sinclair had sent. I knew the decryption key instantly. It was the date of my very first visit to my father's corporate office when I was 7 years old. A date he had kept logged in his desk drawer for over 2 decades. March 14th, 2000. I remembered instantly. Dad had taken me to see where he worked. Showed me the view from his office on the 40th floor. Let me sit in his chair. And spin around. I felt so grown up. I typed the date into the decryption field 0314200. The text was unscrambled. The encrypted email came from Opal Sinclair 52. My father's private secretary of 20 years. The woman Desmond had pressured into taking leave 3 weeks ago. The woman Dad trusted more than anyone else in the company. Her message was precise. Margot, if you're reading this, your father's contingency worked. I've attached a 23-minute audio recording from 3 months ago. Your husband and your uncle met in the conference room after hours. They didn't know I was still there cataloging files in the archive room with the door cracked. I recorded everything. I also encrypted the location of your father's original notarized will. It's stored at an independent law firm downtown. Not with your husband's attorney. I configured this email to send automatically 7 days after my forced leave began. Unless I manually cancelled the trigger. I didn't cancel it. I wanted you to have this. Attached 1 audio file 23 minutes 14 seconds. I pulled out my headphones. Plugged them in. Pressed play. And kept my eyes on the hallway to make sure no one was coming. The audio quality was clear. Conference room acoustics. 2 male voices. The first voice I recognized immediately. Desmond. Calm. Measured. The same tone he used when explaining financial matters to me like I was a child. The second voice made my stomach drop. Preston Lockwood. My uncle. The timing has to be perfect. Desmond said. Once he's incapacitated. We have a 72-hour window before anyone questions the paperwork. And you're sure you can forge his signature? Preston asked. I've been practicing for 6 months. I have samples from every contract he signed in the past decade. The forged will is already drafted. All we need is the medical event and the split 6,040. Desmond said. I get controlling interest in the company and the Lincoln Park properties. You get the investment accounts in the Lake Geneva estate. Clean division. No contestation. I stopped the playback at 3 minutes. I'd heard enough. I forwarded the entire email package to Garrett Townsend with a single line. Secretary's insurance policy. Audio proves premeditation. Then I stood up. Looked down the hallway. And walked to room 412. I knocked softly. No response. I pushed the door open. Iris sat in her wheelchair by the window, looking out at the January darkness. She turned when I entered. You found it, she said. Not a question. I sat down in the chair beside her bed. The room smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. How did you know? Because you're still here. Iris said. If you hadn't found it, you'd be dead by now. Your husband would have made sure of that. She looked at me with those pale grey eyes, sharp as winter glass. Despite the cancer eating through her. 10 years ago. She said slowly. My daughter had a husband exactly like the one downstairs. Impeccable. Adored by everyone. An expert at saying the right words. I saw through him early on. But my daughter refused to believe me. By then, he'd already isolated her from me. I sat very still. He poisoned me first. Iris continued. Small doses over 6 months made it look like my cancer was progressing faster than expected. Doctors adjusted my medication. I got sicker. He positioned himself as the devoted son-in-law caring for me while my daughter worked. Then when I was weak enough that no one would question it, he engineered a car accident. Your daughter. I whispered. My daughter called me from the highway. Iris said, voice flat from speaking this truth so many times it had run out of tears. Said the brakes weren't working. Said she was on a descent and couldn't stop. I heard her screaming. Then the line went dead. The old woman had no knowledge of the text I'd seen about my own brake lines. She was speaking purely from her scars. And the precision of it forced me to sit back down. The police called it mechanical failure. Iris said. But I knew I'd survived his poison. My daughter didn't survive his engineering. He inherited everything she had. Moved to another state 6 months later. Remarried within a year. I'm so sorry. I said. My daughter died because no one warned her in time. Iris said. I survived. But I had nothing left to live for until I saw you sitting out there in that hallway 3 weeks ago. I watched you. I saw the way your husband touched your shoulder, but never looked at your face. I saw the way you flinched when he asked where you'd been. I saw a woman in the same trap my daughter was in. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You are smarter than my daughter was, she said. You found it. Now finish it. And whatever you do, don't touch that car again until this is over. I nodded. I won't. I stood up to leave. Iris's voice stopped me at the door. One more thing. She said. Tomorrow. Your husband will make his move. I've been watching him. He's running out of time. And men like him get dangerous when they're cornered. Be ready. I left room 412 and stood in the corridor looking toward my father's door. Tomorrow. Desmond would make his move. The detective was processing the warrant. Everything was in motion. I needed to sleep tonight so I could play my part well tomorrow. Wednesday morning arrived with sharp January light cutting through the hospital windows. My husband arrived at 9 sharp. He was always precise. And I realized that precision was one of the ways he dominated a space. Control the schedule. Control the people in it. I was sitting in the hallway when he walked off the elevator. Navy suit. Striped tie. The same doting smile he'd worn for 5 years. How's your father this morning? He asked. Sitting down beside me. The same. I said. No changes. He nodded. Checked his phone. Then stood up. I need to speak with the attending physician. Get an update on the prognosis. I'll wait here. I said. He walked down the corridor toward the doctor's office. I watched him go. Counted to 30. Then stood up and followed at a distance. The doctor's office door was cracked open about 6 in. I positioned myself near the nursing station where I could hear without being seen. Dr. Conrad Hewitt. 50 attending physician. And my father's Northwestern colleague. Sat behind his desk. I could see him through the gap. He looked grave. The kind of expression doctors wear when delivering bad news. Mr. Ashford, he said. Voice low and urgent. I need to be frank with you about your father-in-law's condition. Of course. Desmond said. I appreciate your candor. Based on my evaluation this morning, the patient may not survive the next 24 to 48 hours. His cognitive functions are declining rapidly. The stroke damage is more extensive than we initially assessed. I held my breath. If you intend to settle any outstanding legal or estate matters, Dr. Hewitt continued, I suggest you execute them today. Tomorrow may be too late. Desmond was quiet for 3 seconds. Then his voice shifted into perfect measured grief. I understand. Doctor. Thank you for being direct with me. I'll get it sorted. I'm very sorry. Dr. Hewitt said. Desmond stood. I moved quickly back toward my chair, sat down, pulled out my phone. He emerged from the office 30 seconds later, and walked past me without stopping. I watched him disappear into the elevator. Dr. Hewitt stepped out of his office, looked down the hall, caught my eye. He gave a single imperceptible nod. The bait had been delivered. I checked the time. 9:15 a.m. Less than 5 hours before the detective would be in position. The doctor is executing his part of the sting. He just convinced my husband that the window is slamming shut, forcing him to act today. I sat on that plastic chair and waited. Desmond returned at 10 a.m. Told me he needed to handle some paperwork at home. Said he'd be back by noon. He kissed my forehead and left. The moment the elevator doors closed, I stood up and walked to room 412. I knocked once and pushed the door open. 4 people were already inside. Garrett Townsend stood by the window. Briar Finch sat in the chair beside the bed. Dr. Conrad Hewitt leaned against the wall and Iris Peaton sat propped up in her wheelchair like a general coordinating a strike. Before I tell you what the detective revealed in that room, I need to ask, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think Desmond will take the bait. Or B, if you think he'll see through the trap. Add 1 reason why in 5 to 10 words. Please note, the next part includes recreated details for narrative impact. The lesson is what matters. Garrett spoke first. The warrant was signed at 2 a.m. this morning by Judge Keller. Everything is in motion. 2 plainclothes officers will be on this floor by 1:30 p.m. The moment your husband presents those forged documents, they move in. What about my uncle? I asked. Simultaneous execution. Garrett said. Oak Park patrol units hit his residence the same moment we move here. No warning. No chance for communication between conspirators. Briar pulled out her laptop. I've been reviewing the Illinois Probate Act 755 CS5. The forged will can be completely invalidated under multiple grounds. Signatures obtained under undue influence during a period when the testator was under an authorized medication with witnesses who had direct financial interest in the outcome. It's ironclad. What's the strategy? I asked. Dr. Hewitt stepped forward. We let him do it. We let your husband walk in here with those documents. Present them to you. Attempt to execute them at your father's bedside. We catch him in flagrante dato in the act itself that eliminates any defensive maneuvering about intent or preparation. He'll be holding forged documents attempting to defraud a patient under my medical care. Your father is stable. Dr. Hewitt added. Fully conscious. Listening to everything. Ready to play his part when the moment comes. The 4 of them held a rapid briefing in room 412. The old woman tracking every word with her sharp grey eyes. Iris looked at me from her wheelchair. Are you ready? Girl. I thought about the AirTag stitched into my handbag. The burner phone with 6 years of calculations. The brake lines cut on my car. The forged will transferring everything to the man who targeted me before we ever met. Ready? I said. Iris nodded once. Good. Because men like him are most dangerous in the final hour. He knows time is running out. He'll move fast and he'll move hard. Stay sharp. Garrett checked his watch. It's 10:45 now. If the doctor's prognosis works the way we think it will, your husband will be back here by noon with those documents. Officers are mobilizing now. Everything is coordinated. I stood up to leave. Briar caught my arm. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you text me immediately. Don't wait. Don't second guess. I will, I said. I stepped out of room 412 and looked down the corridor toward the elevators. The doors opened. Desmond stepped out, leather briefcase in hand. That familiar doing smile on his face when he saw me. He raised his hand and waved. I raised mine and waved back. Less than 3 hours until the trap closed. And he had no idea. The moment Desmond stepped off that elevator with his briefcase, I knew exactly what he was going to do. I had watched him rehearse manipulation for years. The softened voice, the wounded eyes, the trembling hand reaching for mine. So when he walked into Dad's hospital room at noon with that folder tucked under his arm, I decided to give him the performance of his life. I would mirror every gesture, every calculated pause, every micro-expression he deployed. Let him feel what it was like to be studied. He set the briefcase on the chair and opened it slowly, deliberately, the kind of movement designed to draw attention. I leaned forward slightly, mirroring his posture. I need to talk to you about something, he said, voice soft with manufactured vulnerability. I tilted my head at the exact angle he did. Of course. He pulled out 3 documents and spread them across the bedside table. Legal-sized paper. Official seals. The kind of presentation meant to look authoritative. The doctor told me this morning that your father may not have much time. Desmond continued, his voice breaking slightly on the word time. We need to protect his estate from probate complications. From vultures who might try to contest things after he's gone. I softened my eyes in perfect sync with his. Watched him notice. Watched a flicker of confusion cross his face. What are these? I asked. Reaching for the top document. A quit-claim deed for the Lake Geneva property, he said. Transferring it into a trust to avoid estate tax complications and a durable power of attorney so we can make medical decisions if when the situation deteriorates further and a beneficiary change form for his life insurance policy. I picked up the quit-claim deed and examined it. The notary seal was dated January 12, 2023. 3 days ago. The same morning Dad had his stroke. The signature line showed Wendell Lockwood's name typed beneath it. But the handwriting sample Desmond had attached for reference didn't match Dad's actual signature. I'd seen Dad's signature on the 2019 trust documents Briar showed me. The loops were different. The pressure points were wrong. This wasn't Dad's handwriting. This was Desmond's forgery practice. You're being very thorough, I said, matching his tone. Exactly the same cadence. The same slight tremor of concern. He blinked. I just want to protect your father's legacy. Protect you. I reached out and touched his hand, mirroring the gesture he'd used on me 1,000 times. I know you're always thinking ahead. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not suspicion yet. Just the beginning recognition that something felt different. That I wasn't responding the way I usually did with gratitude. With relief. With the performance of helplessness he'd trained into me. Do you need me to sign anything? I asked. Not yet, he said. First, we need your father's signature. Since he can't physically sign right now, I'll need to guide his hand. It's legally acceptable if there's a witness present. And the signature is made with the testator's clear intent. And he can't express intent right now. I said quietly. But we know what he would want. Desmond replied. He'd want his estate protected. He'd want you taken care of. I nodded slowly. Still mirroring his body language. Still watching him grow more uncomfortable with every passing second. He stood up and moved to the other side of the bed. pulling a pen from his jacket pocket. The same pen he always used for important documents. Black roller ball expensive. He leaned over Dad's motionless body and carefully positioned the quit-claim deed on the bedside tray. Then he reached for Dad's right hand. I watched my father lying there. Eyes closed. Face slack. The ventilator hissing its steady rhythm. Desmond lifted Dad's limp hand and wrapped the fingers around the pen. "I'll guide it," he said. "Just need to get the signature on the line." He positioned the pen tip above the signature line. That's when I saw it. Dad's left eyelid twitched. Not the random muscle spasm of unconsciousness. Not the flutter of REM sleep. This was deliberate. Controlled. A rhythm. 3 short twitches. 3 long. 3 short. SOS. My father had been conscious this entire time. Trapped inside his paralyzed body. Listening to every word Desmond said for the past 3 days. Every bedside conversation. Every whispered plan. Every calculated manipulation. He'd been screaming silently while his body refused to respond. Desmond pressed Dad's hand down, guiding the pen toward the paper. The moment the tip touched the signature line, everything exploded. Dad's eyes snapped open. Not the slow flutter of gradual consciousness. Not the confused blink of someone waking from surgery. This was instant. Total. The explosive awareness of a predator detecting immediate threat. His left hand. The supposedly paralyzed side. The arm that hadn't moved since the stroke. Shot up with impossible force and locked around Desmond's wrist. Desmond gasped. Dad's grip tightened. I could see his knuckles go white. Could see Desmond's face shift from shock to pain. Then Dad threw Desmond's hand backward with enough force that the pen flew out of his grip and skittered across the linoleum floor, bouncing twice before rolling under the cabinet. Desmond stumbled back, cradling his wrist. Dad's eyes locked onto mine. I saw 5 years of unspoken questions crystallize into a single recognition. He knew. He knew I'd married a predator. He knew I'd been performing survival for nearly half a decade. He knew, and he'd been trying to protect me the only way he could by becoming the target himself. "I'm right here. Sweetheart," he said. Voice rough from days of silence. But perfectly clear. "I've been right here the whole time." Tears I didn't know I was holding broke free. Then his gaze shifted past my shoulder toward the door. His expression changed. Relief melting into something else. Terror. I turned to follow his EY line. The door was open exactly 6 in. Someone had been standing in the hallway listening to everything. Desmond didn't look at the door. He looked at me, and the performance I'd watched for 5 years shut off like someone cut the power. The air in the room altered. The generator that had been buzzing for so long I'd stopped hearing it suddenly went dead. Everything was different. His face changed. Not gradually. Not with the careful control he'd always maintained. It just changed. The warmth drained out of his eyes. The softness disappeared from his posture. What was left looked like something carved from ice. 7 years. He said. Voice stripped of every pretense. 7 years I invested building this family. You think I did this out of affection? Out of love? I didn't answer. I built equity. He continued. I positioned assets. I managed risk. This was a portfolio. Not a marriage. And you. He gestured at me with the hand Dad hadn't crushed. You were always the easiest part of the equation. Lonely. Insecure. Exactly what I needed. Dad's grip tightened on the bed rail. I could hear his breathing change. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Desmond asked. I didn't answer. I scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in months. Preston Lockwood. My uncle. The man who'd stood beside Desmond at our wedding. The man whose signature was on the forged will. I pressed call and switched to speakerphone. It rang once. Is it signed? Preston's voice came through immediately. Not hello. Not a greeting. Just the question. I looked at Desmond. His face went very still. Uncle Preston. I said clearly. It's Margot. Desmond is standing right here in the hospital room with me. Would you like to repeat that question? 3 seconds of silence on the speakerphone. Then the dial tone. Preston Lockwood just hung up on his own conspiracy. I set the phone down on the bedside table. Call log still visible. Timestamp recorded. Self-indictment complete. Desmond stared at me. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. I said. That's when the door pushed open. Celeste Harrington stepped through. The head nurse. 33 years old. The woman who'd appeared at the nursing station every time Desmond visited. The woman who coordinated timing with surgical precision for 3 weeks. She had her phone raised in her hand. I cannot do this anymore. She said, voice steady. I will not do this anymore. Desmond turned toward her. Celeste. Do not say another word. She ignored him completely. Looked at me instead. He found a mistake I made in 2019. She said. Epinephrine dosage error. Patient survived. But it should have been reported to the state. I was terrified. I have 2 kids. I couldn't lose my license. She held up her phone. He said if I helped him, the file would disappear. If I didn't, he'd send it to the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. I'd never work as a nurse again. Desmond took a step toward her. Stop talking. She pressed play on her phone. Desmond's voice filled the room. Crystal clear. Recorded. You're going to increase the warfarin dosage gradually. Not enough to trigger alarms. Just enough to accelerate the decline. When he crashes, it'll look like complications from the stroke. Natural progression. No one will question it. Celeste's recorded voice. What if someone notices Desmond's recorded voice? They won't. And if they do, you're the one who administered it. You're the one whose license is on the line. So you make sure no one notices. She stopped the playback. You have to understand. Celeste wasn't confessing to me. She was performing a legal maneuver. Every word she spoke was calculated for prosecutorial value. Blackmail. Coercion. Duress. The 2019 timeline establishing pattern. She wasn't apologizing. She was plea bargaining. I've been recording him for 2 weeks. Celeste said every threat. Every instruction. I have 12 separate audio files documenting the entire conspiracy. I contacted a criminal defense attorney 3 days ago. She's negotiating my immunity deal with the state's attorney right now. She looked at Desmond. I'm trading reckless endangerment for testimony against attempted murder under 720 ILCS 58-4. My attorney says with the recordings and my cooperation, I'll serve no jail time. Lose my license. Yes. But I'll keep my freedom and my kids will have their mother. Desmond's face had gone white. You have nothing, he said. But his voice cracked on the word nothing. I have everything. Celeste replied. And so does she. She nodded at me. Then turned and walked back to the doorway. Didn't leave. Just stood there waiting. Desmond looked at me. At my father. Eyes wide open. Fully conscious. Witnessing everything. At Celeste standing guard at the door. At the forged documents still spread across the bedside table. At his briefcase on the chair. At the phone showing Preston's disconnected call. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. He had no performance left. No accomplice. No documentation that wasn't evidence against him. No uncle who hadn't just self-incriminated on a recorded line. No nurse who would continue the poisoning. No wife who didn't know every detail of his 6-year plan. The air in the room had changed. The generator that had been buzzing for 17 years was finally completely dead. And then we all heard it. Heavy boots striding down the hospital corridor. Getting louder. Multiple sets. Not the soft-soled shoes of nurses. Not the leather dress shoes of doctors. Boots. Police boots. The kind that make a particular sound on linoleum when they're moving with purpose. Celeste stepped aside from the doorway. Desmond turned toward the sound. And for the first time since I'd met him 6 years ago, I saw real fear on his face. The door slammed open at exactly 1:30 p.m. Detective Garrett Townsend stepped through, flanked by 2 uniformed Chicago PD officers. He had a warrant folded in his left hand. Desmond Ashford. Garrett said. Voice flat and official. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Under 720 ILCS 5H4 financial exploitation of an elderly person, under 720 ILCS 517-56 attempted forgery, under 720 ILCS 517-3 and coercive control under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act 750 ILCS 60-103. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. One of the officers, Hayes, according to his name tag, moved forward with handcuffs. Desmond didn't resist, didn't protest, didn't ask for a lawyer or claim innocence or demand to see the warrant. He just stood there perfectly still while Hayes cuffed his wrist behind his back. Garrett continued. At this moment, officers are executing a warrant at 712 Kenilworth Avenue, Oak Park, for the arrest of co-conspirator Preston Lockwood on identical charges. This is a coordinated operation. Both arrests are happening simultaneously. Desmond looked at me one final time. No hatred. No repentance. Just flat realization. The expression of a chess player who miscalculated the endgame 17 moves ago and only now sees the inevitable checkmate. He'd lost his queen. Lost his bishops. Lost every piece that mattered. You were always better at this than I gave you credit for, he said quietly. Then Hayes and the second officer, a younger woman whose tag read Morrison, each took one of Desmond's arms and walked him toward the door. I watched him go. Watched them march him down the corridor, past the nursing station where Celeste had coordinated timing for 3 weeks, past room 412 where Iris sat in her wheelchair, past the plastic chairs where I'd sat alone for days, thinking I was protecting my father when really he'd been protecting me. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. Desmond turned to face forward. The doors closed between us. Briar Finch stepped into the room. She'd been waiting in the hallway the whole time. She looked at me. Then at my father. Then back at me. Are you okay? She asked. I don't know yet. I said. She nodded. I'll be downstairs. Take your time. She left, closing the door softly behind her. For the first time in 5 years, I was alone in a room with my father without Desmond filtering the air between us. Dad shifted in the hospital bed. The ventilator had been removed while the arrest was happening. Dr. Hewitt had done it quietly, efficiently the moment Dad's breathing stabilized on its own. He looked tired. Older than I remembered. But his eyes were clear. He reached for my hand. I took it. I always knew you were strong. Sweetheart, he said. Voice rough from days of silence. I was just terrified you hadn't discovered it yet. I sat down in the chair beside his bed. The same chair I'd sat in for days. But everything felt different now. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Because he would have read it on your face. Dad said. You're strong. But you're not a liar. If I'd warned you, if I'd told you what I suspected, you would have looked at him differently, and he would have noticed. Men like Desmond, they watch for changes in baseline behavior. Any shift would have triggered his contingency plans. He paused, catching his breath. Every time I called, he answered. Dad continued. Every dinner invitation I extended. He handled the logistics. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every casual coffee. I couldn't reach you without going through him first. That was an accident. That was architecture. I thought about the yoga class I'd stopped attending. The friend Rachel I'd stopped seeing. The thesis advisor's teaching offer I'd turned down. All the small decisions that hadn't felt like decisions at the time. Just adjustments. Compromises. Being considerate of my husband's needs. He isolated you systematically, Dad said. And I couldn't break through without tipping him off. So, I waited. Built my case. Coordinated with Detective Townsend. Set the trap. And prayed you'd find the thread before it was too late. When was the last time someone asked me if I was okay? And actually waited for the answer. Not the performance answer. Not the automatic reassurance. The real answer. So, I'm going to ask you something I haven't asked in 5 years, Dad said, squeezing my hand. And this time, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you okay? I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who'd orchestrated an entire sting operation while lying motionless in a hospital bed. Who'd let his own brother betray him to expose the full conspiracy. Who'd listened to Desmond's bedside manipulations for 3 days. Conscious and trapped. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike. No. I said. I'm not okay. But I will be, he nodded. That's the real answer. Good. We sat in silence for a minute. The hospital sounds filtered in from outside distant monitors. Beeping. Elevator chiming. Nurses talking at the station. Normal sounds. The world continuing. Dad shifted his gaze. Looking past my shoulder toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Chicago skyline. January light cut sharp angles across the buildings. His voice dropped careful and deliberate. There's one more person you need to see today, he said. Someone I haven't been able to reach in 5 years. Not because I didn't try, but because every channel went through him first. He squeezed my hand. She needs to know you're safe now. I am drinking tea for the first time in 4 days when Detective Townsend calls to tell me my uncle has been arrested. The cafeteria is nearly empty at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. I chose a table by the window overlooking Superior Street. Far from anyone who might recognize me as the woman whose husband was arrested 6 hours ago for conspiracy to commit murder. The tea is chamomile. It tastes like nothing. Mrs. Ashford. Detective Townsend. Says when I answer. His voice carries the flat exhaustion of someone who has been awake far too long. I wanted to update you personally. We executed the warrant on Preston Lockwood's residence in Oak Park at 3:30 this afternoon. He's in custody. I watch steam rise from my cup. What did you find? Draft documents for forged wills. $15,000 in cash bundled with rubber bands in a bedroom drawer. Text message logs going back 18 months. He pauses. The texts confirm coordination with your husband. Dates, amounts, target names. It's comprehensive. I should feel something. Vindication perhaps, or relief that the conspiracy extended beyond my marriage into my family's architecture. But all I feel is the slow realization that my entire adult life was built on foundation made of lies. There's one more thing. Townsend says, his tone shifts softer. More careful. When we arrested him, your uncle asked us to relay a message to you. I sat down my cup. What message? He said. Tell my niece I am sorry about her mother. The cafeteria goes silent. Not actually silent. There's still the hum of refrigeration units. The distant clatter of dishes being cleared. But I can't hear any of it. All I hear is the echo of 5 words: sorry about her mother. My mother died when I was 3 years old. That's what my father told me. That's what I've believed for 27 years. Mrs. Ashford. Are you still there? Yes. I say. My voice sounds far away. Did he say anything else? No. Just that I thought you should know. I thank him. I end the call. I sit very still and try to remember the last time my father spoke about my mother. I can't. In our house. My mother was a ghost we never named. There were no photographs on the walls. No stories shared at dinner. When I asked questions as a child, my father would say, "She loved you very much," and then he would leave the room. Eventually, I stopped asking. I assumed it was grief. I assumed he couldn't bear to speak about the woman he'd lost. But Preston's message doesn't sound like condolence. It sounds like confession. I pull out my phone and open the Notes app where I've been tracking the timeline. January 13th. Desmond takes me to dinner. Isolates me from the one person who might have warned me. January 14th. I discover the predation my father orchestrates the sting. January 15th. Desmond is arrested. Preston is arrested. And I learned that whatever happened to my mother is something my uncle feels he needs to apologize for. What was there to apologize for? I think about the way my father's face changed when I asked him this morning why Desmond chose me. He said you were vulnerable. Young. He said you had no mother to warn you. He didn't say you had no mother because she died. He said, you had no mother. As if her absence was the condition. Not a tragedy. I stand up. The tea is still untouched. I leave it on the table and walk back toward the elevators. Past the gift shop with its bouquets of carnations and Maya balloons. Past the volunteer desk, where an elderly woman is doing a crossword puzzle. My father is on the 4th floor, room 428. He's been there for 3 days recovering from what the doctors called a moderate cardiovascular event. He coded the phrase differently when we finally spoke this morning. He called it the price of a 5-year investigation. The elevator doors open. I step inside and press the button for the 4th floor. I need to ask him about Preston's message. I need to know what my uncle is apologizing for. But there's a difference between needing to know and being ready to hear the answer. The elevator rises. I watch the numbers change. 2, 3, 4. When the doors open, I see the long corridor stretching toward my father's room. The fluorescent lights are too bright. They make everything look sterile and exposed. I think about what Briar said yesterday in the hospital parking garage. Your father has been protecting you from something much worse than a bad marriage. I think about Wendell's voice this morning when he said, that was not accident. That was architecture. I think about my mother who died when I was 3 years old or didn't die or died in a way that required apology from the brother-in-law who just got arrested for conspiracy to exploit dying strangers. The nurse at the 4th floor station looks up and smiles. Here to see your father. Yes. I say. She nods toward the corridor. He's awake. Go on in. I stand at the threshold between the elevator bank and the patient corridor. Room 428 is 20 feet away. The door is partially open. I can see the edge of my father's bed. The 4 stand the monitor displaying his vital signs in green numbers. All I have to do is walk inside and ask the question. But once I ask, I can't hear the answer. I stand very still and try to decide whether I'm ready to know what happened to my mother. 2 weeks pass and the world keeps turning. Despite my shattered shape, Briar Finch calls on a Tuesday morning and asks me to come to the precinct to see something. I haven't spoken to Briar much since the arrests. She checked in twice. Both times via text. Both times with the careful distance of someone who knows friendship and professional obligation occupy different territories. This call is different. Her voice carries urgency. Stripped of social cushioning. Can you come to South Michigan? She asks. There's evidence you need to see. I take the red line downtown. The train is half empty at 10 o'clock in the morning. Mostly tourists consulting phone maps and a man asleep across 3 seats. I watch the city scroll past through scratched windows and try not to think about the last time I rode the L January 12th coming home from a gallery opening in Pilsen 3 hours before someone tried to kill me. Except I didn't know that then. I thought I was just tired. The Chicago Police Department's Detective Division occupies a gray building on South Michigan Avenue that looks like every municipal structure built in the 1970s, functional, unlowly, designed to communicate the seriousness of civic infrastructure. Briar meets me in the lobby and walks me through security without speaking. We take the elevator to the 3rd floor. Garrett Townsend is waiting in a conference room with a laptop open on the table. He stands when I enter, gestures to a chair. "Mrs. Ashford," he says. "Thank you for coming." I sit. Briar closes the door and takes the seat beside me. The laptop screen shows a paused video. Bright thumbnail. White text overlay. Red TikTok logo in the corner. A delivery driver in River North runs a morning vlog on TikTok. Briar says. She angles the laptop toward me. Posted January 12th at 6:47 a.m. Watch the background at the 47 mark, parking lot, 4th row. She presses play. The video opens on a young man sitting in a car holding a breakfast burrito wrapped in foil. He's complaining about the cold, about early shift hours. About how Chicago winters make you question every life choice that led you to a city where the wind feels like punishment. Behind him. Through the driver's side window. I can see a parking lot. Grey morning light. Rows of parked cars. Briar's finger hovers over the trackpad. Here. She pauses at 47 seconds. They're in the background, 4th row. A hooded figure crouched beneath a silver Honda CR-V. Dark jacket. Hands working something low near the front wheel. The resolution is poor, pixelated shot through a car window on a phone camera optimized for faces. Not distant subjects. But the posture is unmistakable. Someone working on a vehicle they don't own. My vehicle. January 12th. 2023. 6:42 a.m. Garrett says quietly. Geo-tagged to Northwestern Memorial Hospital employee parking. We pulled the metadata. I stare at the frozen frame. The figure's face is obscured by the hood turned away from the camera. I can see gloved hands. The edge of a dark jacket. The angle of shoulders bent to a task. 3 days before your father's stroke. I say. Garrett nods. 3 days before the Digitalis poisoning. Same week as the delivery driver's video. We believe your uncle hired someone to sabotage your vehicle. Briar pulls up a second window on the laptop. Screenshots of text messages. Green bubbles on a black background. The contact name is listed as unknown. Burner phone texts recovered from Preston Lockwood's laptop. She says deleted from the phone itself. But backed up to cloud storage he didn't know how to disable. Watch the dates. I read January 10th. Target vehicle confirmed. Silver CR-V Illinois plates. January 11th. Location verified. Employee lot Northwest Memorial. Early AM window best. January 12th. Done. Brake line compromised. She won't make it past highway speed. January 12th. Payment as agreed. No further contact. The room is very quiet. I can hear the hum of the laptop fan. The distant sound of phones ringing in the bullpen outside. Resolution is not good enough for facial identification. Garrett says. But timestamp and location are geo-tagged. Paired with the burner phone texts we recovered from your uncle's laptop. We can establish intent. Means. And timeline. Someone tried to kill me 3 days before they tried to kill my father. And a 22-year-old delivery driver filming breakfast commentary accidentally documented attempted murder. You have to understand the absurdity. A delivery driver filming himself eating a breakfast burrito while complaining about Chicago weather just handed prosecutors a second attempted murder charge. Digital exhaust. Inadvertent witness. Justice via algorithm. Why didn't the brakes fail? I ask. Garrett exchanges a look with Briar. We had your vehicle towed and examined by a forensic mechanic. The brake line was scored damaged but not severed. Whoever your uncle hired either lost their nerve or lacked the expertise to finish the job. You were driving on compromised brakes for 3 days. But they held. I think about January 15th. Driving to the hospital after Desmond called to say my father had collapsed. The way the brakes felt soft when I stopped at the light on Superior Street. I thought it was anxiety making my body unreliable. It was sabotage making my car a weapon. Preston wanted both of us dead. I say. Briar nods. Brake sabotage targeting you on January 12th. Digitalis poisoning targeting your father the same day administered by your husband. 2 separate murder attempts within hours of each other. The timeline establishes conspiracy. Preston wanted both you and Wendell eliminated to secure the $28 million estate without legal challenge. Garrett closes the laptop. The state's attorney is amending the charges. Preston Lockwood will face 2 counts of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, plus the financial exploitation and forgery charges already filed. Trial is scheduled for March. I stand. My legs feel distant as if they belong to someone else. Thank you for showing me. We'll need you to testify. Briar says gently. About the brakes. About the timeline. About what your uncle had to gain. I know. I say. She walks me back to the elevator. We don't speak until the doors open. Are you okay? She asks. I don't know how to answer that. My uncle tried to kill me. My husband tried to kill my father. A stranger on the internet saved my life without knowing it. Okay. Is not a category that applies anymore. I'm functional. I say. The elevator descends. I walk out of the precinct into late January cold and check my phone. February 5th. 2023. 3 weeks since the hallway. Since the arrests. Since Preston left that message about my mother. 3 weeks I have been avoiding room 447. Dad is being discharged tomorrow. If I am going to ask what Uncle Preston meant, I need to do it today. Dad has been home from the hospital for 3 days when Briar Finch calls and asks if we can come to the Loop for a trial disclosure meeting. There is something we need to hear before the arraignment. I never got the chance to ask him about Preston's message. The morning he was discharged, a home health nurse arrived to review medication protocols and wound care instructions. And the window closed. We've been living in careful parallel since then. Me in my old bedroom upstairs. Him in the first-floor study converted to temporary recovery space. We eat breakfast together without speaking. We watch the news. We do not discuss Uncle Preston or brake lines or 30-year-old apologies about mothers who died when daughters were 3. But Briar's call changes the architecture. Trial disclosure. She says. Preston's defense attorney filed a psychological evaluation and deposition history. The prosecution wants you both to hear it before the arraignment so there are no surprises in court. We take a cab to South Michigan Avenue. Dad moves slowly. Still recovering, one hand braced against the doorframe as he climbs out onto the sidewalk. The law office occupies the 14th floor of a glass tower overlooking Millennium Park. We ride the elevator in silence. The conference room has floor-to-ceiling windows facing west. I can see the bin sculpture in the distance. Tourists clustered around it despite February cold. Briar is already there, seated beside a man I don't recognize. Mid-50s grey suit. Wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of precise grooming that signals expensive legal representation. Wendell Margot. Briar says standing. This is Malcolm Reeves. He's representing Preston Lockwood. Malcolm Reeves extends a hand. His grip is firm. Professional. Empty of warmth. Thank you both for coming. I know this is difficult. We sit. Dad lowers himself into the chair beside me carefully. The way people move when their bodies have recently betrayed them. Malcolm opens a leather portfolio and removes a document. My client has provided a full deposition as part of his defense strategy. The psychological evaluation establishes context for the events of January 2023. I want to walk you through the relevant history so you understand what will be presented at trial. I glance at Dad. His face is unreadable. Malcolm continues. In 1993, Wendell Lockwood discovered his brother Preston in an affair with his wife Margot's mother Caroline. Instead of confronting it publicly, instead of severing the relationship or demanding accountability, Wendell chose forgiveness. He kept it quiet, protected the family, allowed Preston to remain part of their lives without consequence or exposure. The room goes very still. Malcolm says the year 1993 and I do the math automatically. I was 3 years old. My mother died that same year. Uncle Preston had an affair with my mother and then she died and no one ever told me. I turned to look at my father. He is staring out the window at Michigan Avenue, traffic 14 floors below. His hands are folded on the table in front of him, perfectly still. The psychological evaluation, Malcolm says, establishes that Preston Lockwood lived under that forgiveness for 3 decades. His brother held his deepest shame, adultery, betrayal of family trust, and chose mercy over exposure. On the surface, this appears noble. In practice, it became a form of psychological entrapment. Briar's pen hovers over her notepad. She doesn't write anything. Preston could not escape the knowledge that Wendell knew. Malcolm continues. Every family gathering, every holiday, every time they spoke, the unspoken history sat between them. Wendell's silence was not absolution. It was a permanent reminder of debt. Forgiveness without confrontation is not freedom. It's a cage. I find my voice. You're saying my father's mercy drove Preston to attempted murder. Malcolm meets my eyes. I'm saying 30 years of unresolved guilt calcified into resentment. Preston believed Wendell used that forgiveness as leverage. Silent. Perpetual moral authority. When Caroline died in 1993, shortly after the affair ended, Preston interpreted Wendell's grief as accusation. He spent the next 3 decades trapped in that dynamic, unable to move forward, unable to escape the architecture of forgiveness that demanded nothing and offered no closure. How do you carry a secret like that for 30 years? How do you forgive your brother for sleeping with your wife? Watch your wife die months later. Raise your daughter alone and never speak the truth out loud. I look at my father again. He has not moved. His eyes are still on the traffic below. The defense will argue. Malcolm says carefully that the conspiracy charges stem from long-term psychological harm inflicted by weaponized forgiveness. Preston Lockwood's actions in January 2023 were the culmination of 3 decades living under unbearable moral debt with no mechanism for resolution. Briar closes her notepad. That's not a legal defense. Malcolm. Psychological context doesn't negate conspiracy to commit murder. No. Malcolm agrees. But it establishes motive. It humanizes my client. And it complicates the narrative of simple greed. I wait for my father to speak. To deny it. To defend himself. To explain why he never told me that my mother's brother-in-law, the man who came to every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every milestone, had betrayed him in the most fundamental way. But he doesn't speak. Finally, without turning from the window, he says quietly, I knew you would find the thread eventually. Sweetheart. I just hoped it would not be like this. His voice is so soft. I almost don't hear it. The meeting ends. Malcolm Reeves packs his portfolio, shakes hands, leaves with the efficient exit of someone who has delivered difficult information professionally. Briar walks us to the elevator. I'm sorry, she says. I wanted you to hear it from us first. Not an open court. I nod. I don't trust my voice. We walk out of the law office into Chicago, February. Cold sky. Iron Gay over Michigan Avenue. I take Dad's hand. The same hand that signed forgiveness 30 years ago. The same hand that carried that unbearable weight alone so I could grow up without the poison. He does not say anything. Neither do I. Some silences are not empty. Some silences are archaeology. September arrives sharp and clean. First coat since spring. First time entering Cook County Courthouse. Not as observer, but as named party in a criminal trial. The months between February and now have been archaeology of a different kind. Dad and I learned to live in the same house without the weight of unspoken history crushing us. We talk about my mother sometimes now carefully in small doses. The way you handle something fragile that has been buried too long. He tells me she loved jazz music and hated cilantro and had a laugh that made strangers smile. He does not tell me about the affair. I do not ask. Some truths require time before they can be touched. But today is not about the past. Today is about watching two men face consequences. Courtroom 5.06 is smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights. Wood paneling gone dull with age. Rows of benches like church pews. I sit in the front row beside my father. Briar is 2 rows back in her professional capacity as contract lawyer assisting the prosecution. The jury box is filled with 12 faces I have memorized over the past 3 weeks. A postal worker. A retired teacher. A woman who works in it. A man who raises orchids. Desmond sits at the defense table in a grey suit I have never seen before. His hands are folded on the table in front of him. He has not looked at me once today. Preston sits at a separate table with Malcolm Reeves. He looks smaller than I remember. Older. Diminished. The prosecution calls Celeste Harrington. She walks to the witness stand in a navy dress. Hair pulled back. No jewelry. She places her hand on the Bible and swears to tell the truth. When she sits, she finally looks at me. Her face is calm. The prosecutor walks her through the timeline. How Desmond approached her 2 years ago. How he initiated the relationship professional at first. Then personal. Then coercive. He found my mistake in the 2019 audit. Celeste says her voice is steady clinical. Epinephrine dosage miscalculation. The patient survived. But it should have been reported. He told me if I helped him, the file would disappear. If I refused, he would send it to the state licensing board. The prosecutor nods. And what did he ask you to do? Electronic order forgery. He needed access to patient medication records without triggering pharmacy flags. Specifically, he wanted Wendell Lockwood's war and dosage increased incrementally enough to cause hemorrhagic stroke. Not enough to raise automated alerts. I hear my father's breath catch beside me. And did you comply? Yes. Celeste says. I altered the electronic orders on January 11th. Desmond administered the increased dose on January 12th. The defense attorney stands for cross-examination. He's younger than Malcolm Reeves. Sharper. More aggressive. Ms. Harrington. He says. If you were so afraid of my client, why are you testifying against him now? Celeste is quiet for a moment. Then she looks directly at me. Because I looked at her, she says. And remembered when I used to be a person like her. Before I let that man hollow me out. Before I forgot what it felt like to be whole. Celeste looks at me and I see it, the recognition. She is not apologizing to the court. She is not performing contrition for the jury. She is looking at me and saying, I was you. I could have been you. He does this. This is what he does. Desmond stares at me throughout the entire 40-minute testimony. I never look away. The prosecution rests. The defense presents character witnesses for Preston neighbors. Former colleagues. People who describe him as quiet. Reliable. Wounded by his brother's lifelong moral superiority. Malcolm Reeves argues psychological mitigation. The prosecutor argues that pain does not justify conspiracy to commit murder. Closing arguments take 2 hours. The jury deliberates for 3. We wait in a conference room down the hall. Dad reads a newspaper. Briar answers emails. I watch the clock on the wall and count seconds. At 4:17 p.m. the bailiff calls us back. The jury files in. None of them look at the defense table. That's when I know the judge asks the foreperson to stand. She's the woman who raises orchids. Late 60s. Steady hands. Clear eyes. On the charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the first count. How do you find? We, the jury, find the defendant, Desmond Ashford, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the second count. Guilty. On the charges of financial exploitation of an elderly person. Forgery and coercive control under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. Guilty on all counts. The clerk repeats it for the record. The judge sets sentencing for immediate execution under Illinois statute given severity and flight risk. Desmond Ashford. The judge says you are hereby sentenced to 22 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections without eligibility for early parole. 22 years. The judge says it once. The bailiff repeats it into the record. Desmond does not flinch. I exhale for what feels like the first time in 12 months. Preston Lockwood. You are sentenced to 9 years. Preston closes his eyes. Malcolm Reeves puts a hand on his shoulder. The judge's gavel comes down. The bailiffs move forward to escort the defendants out. Desmond stands, turns, and looks at me one final time. I hold his gaze until the courtroom door closes behind him. Then I stand and walk out into the corridor. Dad is beside me. Briar catches up as we reach the plaza outside. Late afternoon. September light slants gold across the courthouse steps. The air smells like fallen leaves and distant rain. I take my first full breath outside in 6 hours. My lungs open completely for the first time in a year. It is over. Briar says, pulling me into a tight hug. You are safe. Breathe. I breathe. Dad's hand settles on my shoulder. We stand together in the September air. And I think about what he said in January. There is someone I need to see. Someone Desmond kept me from reaching for 5 years. An elderly woman in a hospital room at Northwestern Memorial River North Tower. I still do not know who she is. But now that the trial is over, now that I can breathe, I need to go back to that hospital and find out. I buy white lies at the corner market on Michigan Avenue and drive to Northwestern Memorial before the hospital wakes up completely. The morning after the verdict feels different than every other morning for the past year. The air tastes cleaner. Traffic sounds less abrasive. I parallel park on Superior Street without the tight knot of anxiety that used to live between my shoulder blades whenever I made a decision without consulting Desmond first. The lies sit on the passenger seat wrapped in brown paper. I carry them through the main entrance and take the elevator to the 4th floor. The nurse's station is quiet at 7 o'clock in the morning. A woman I recognize from my father's stay looks up when I approach. Her expression shifts the moment she sees the flowers. Something between recognition and sorrow. I'm looking for a patient. I say. An elderly woman. 4th floor. I saw her in the corridor several times back in January, but I never asked her name. I thought the nurse's face completes the sentence before I can. I am so sorry. Honey. She says gently. Ms. Peaton passed 3 weeks ago. Went peacefully in her sleep early morning just before dawn. The corridor tilts slightly. 3 weeks ago during the trial disclosures while I was sitting in that conference room learning about my mother's affair while Malcolm Reeves was explaining psychological wounds and toxic forgiveness while I was excavating 30-year-old secret she was dying. Iris Peaton. The nurse continues. She was 74. Had been here since November. Complications from congestive heart failure. Room 412. I never asked her name. I saw her in the corridor for months and I never asked her name, and now she is gone. She asked about you until the last week. The nurse says. Did not know your name either. Called you the girl with the brown hair from the 4th floor. When I told her the trial had started, she nodded and said, good. Then it's done. Went to sleep that night and never woke up. Good. Then it's done. Those were Iris Peaton's last words about me. Not my name. Not my face. Just the knowledge that the trial had started. And then she went to sleep and never woke up. I stand in the center of the 4th floor corridor holding white lies that will never reach the woman they were meant for. The fluorescent lights are the same yellow I remember from January. The mechanical rhythm of monitors and ventilators creates the same background hum. Everything is exactly where it belongs except Iris. The nurse disappears into the back office. I hear drawers opening, papers shuffling. When she returns, she's holding a cream-colored envelope. She left this. The nurse says. Handing it to me. Asked me to give it to you if you ever came back. She was very specific. The girl with the brown hair. 4th floor. The one who visited the man in 428. The envelope has no name on it. Just a single line in careful script. The girl with the brown hair, 4th floor. I take the elevator back down. Walk through the lobby. Push through the glass doors into September morning air that smells like exhaust and lake water and the last gasp of summer before autumn takes hold. There's a stone bench outside the main entrance. I sit and open the envelope. Inside is a single sheet of lined paper. The kind you tear from a spiral notebook. The handwriting is shaky but deliberate. Each letter formed with visible effort. Dear girl with the brown hair. I never learned your name. I only knew you as the girl with the brown hair who stood in the 4th floor corridor and looked straight back at people. My daughter had eyes like yours once before she learned to look at the floor when her husband spoke. Before she stopped visiting me because he said hospitals made him uncomfortable. Before she disappeared into a marriage that swallowed her whole. I saw you looking at your husband in January. I saw the way you held yourself careful, contained like you were trying to take up less space. I saw him touch your shoulder and watched your whole body go still. But you looked back. You did not look at the floor. You looked him straight in the eye. And that told me everything I needed to know. You had not disappeared yet. There was still time. I wanted to say something. I wanted to walk up to you in that corridor and tell you what I saw. But you were a stranger and it was none of my business. And I have spent 74 years being polite and minding my own business while women disappeared right in front of me. So I am saying it now. I saw you. I saw what he was doing. And I saw you looking back. If you are reading this, it means you came back. It means you survived whatever was happening in January. It means you are still here. How many women has Iris seen in hospital corridors over her lifetime? How many daughters? How many strangers with eyes that had not yet learned to look at the floor? And how many times did she stay silent because it was none of her business? I keep reading. So here is what I need you to do. Live well for yourself. Not for him. Not for anyone who tried to make you smaller. For yourself. And if you ever see someone standing in a hospital corridor with those same eyes, the ones that have not learned to look away yet, say something. Even if it is none of your business. Especially then. The girl with the brown hair deserves to know someone saw her. Signed G. I read the letter twice. 3 times. The signature is just a single letter G. Not Iris. Not her full name. Just G. I fold the letter. Single sheet of lined paper. Careful script signed with a single letter that contains an entire lifetime of silence and witness. And sit on the stone bench for a long time. September wind comes off the lake sharp and clean. And I do not feel cold. I know what comes next. Not revenge. Not closure. Something else entirely. November arrives in Chicago with low silver sky and brilliant brief cracks of light. I signed dissolution papers at 9:47 a.m. On a Tuesday that feels like any other Tuesday. Except it is the last one I will spend married to Desmond Ashford. The family law office is on the 14th floor of a building in the Loop with windows facing west toward the river. My attorney is a woman in her 50s named Karen Blackwell, who handles these cases with the efficiency of someone who has seen this story too many times to be surprised by any variation. She slides the final document across the desk. Dissolution decree finalized. She says, under Illinois Marriage and Dissolution of Marriage Act, all marital asset claims are permanently stripped due to fraudulent inducement and coercive control. He has no claim to anything you brought into the marriage or anything you build after today. I sign my name. The pen makes a scratching sound against paper. Karen closes the folder. Ms. Ashford, do you wish to revert to your maiden name Lockwood as part of the dissolution decree? It's standard procedure. We can file the amendment today. I look at my signature on the page. Margot Ashford. The name I have carried for 5 years. The name that became a cage. Then evidence. Then testimony. No. I say I am keeping the name I have from today. It belongs entirely to me. Not a title I wear because I belong to someone else. Ashford is mine now. Karen nods once. Sharp and approving. Good. I walk out of the building into November air. No one knows where I am. It used to be a threat isolation control. The systematic severing of every connection that might have saved me. Now it is just freedom. Briar is waiting on the sidewalk with 2 cups of coffee. First day of the rest of your life. She says. Handing me one. How does it feel? I take the cup. The warmth bleeds through the paper like breathing. December arrives cold and clear. Dad calls me to a board meeting at the company office's small gathering. Just the 3 senior partners and the executive secretary who has worked for him for 15 years. Her name is Opal Sinclair 62. Returning from medical leave with the kind of quiet smile that suggests she knows exactly what this meeting is about. Dad stands at the head of the conference table and announces he is transitioning primary operations to me effective January 1st. The partners nod. They have known this was coming since I was a child sitting in the lobby doing homework while Dad worked late. Afterward, Opal hands me an encrypted USB drive. From your father. She says he asked me to give this to you when it was time. I plug it into my laptop that night. The drive contains 30 years of firm history case files. Client relationships. Institutional knowledge built over decades. At the bottom of the directory is a text file labeled read_me first. I open it. The note reads, been waiting since you were 7 for you to take this seat. Sweetheart. Just did not know how long the road would be back to yourself. Welcome home. Dad's note on the encrypted USB reads, been waiting since you were 7. I was 7 years old when I first asked what he did at work. 23 years. He has been waiting 23 years for me to come back to myself. January passes in the mechanics of transition learning systems. Meeting clients. Understanding the architecture my father built over 3 decades. February brings the first signs of spring. Despite the cold light lasting a few minutes longer. Each evening. The quality of air shifting from iron to silver. In early March. I returned to Northwestern Memorial to deliver a donation check to the palliative care unit. 4th floor. Same corridor. Same fluorescent lights. A woman is standing outside room 4. 1. 2 packing boxes. She is in her early 40s. Dark hair pulled back. Wearing jeans and a sweater that has seen better days. When she turns, I see she has her mother's hands. Long fingers. The same way of holding her shoulders. Helen Collier stands outside room 4. 1. 2. Packing her mother's effects. Same room. Same floor. Same fluorescent light. She has her mother's hands. But when she looks at me, she does not look at the floor anymore. You're the girl with the brown hair. She says. It is not a question. Yes. I say. I'm Margot. Helen. She says Iris was my mother. We stand in the corridor where her mother watched me for months. Recognizing something she could not name but understood in the architecture of bodies and eyes and the way women learn to make themselves smaller. I am starting a foundation. I tell her. For people like us. I would like to name it after your mother, after Iris. Helen laughs. There are tears in her eyes. But the laugh is genuine. She would absolutely hate that. She says. Mom spent her whole life being quiet. Being polite. Not making a fuss. Don't memorialize that. Name it after what she told you to do. Not after her. After the action. I think about the letter. The single sheet of lined paper. The instructions signed with just one letter. Speak Up. March 2024. Speak Up Foundation. Legally incorporated with $2 million from my personal trust. Pro bono family law representation for victims of domestic exploitation and elder financial abuse. Office space donated by Dad's firm. Intake lines opening March 15th. I sit in my new apartment the night before launch. Smaller than the place I shared with Desmond. River North. Third floor windows facing east toward the lake. The lease has only my name on it. The walls are pale cream. The color my father loves. The color I never got to choose before. The apartment is dark and still. Tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. The phone will ring for the first time. Someone will call the intake line looking for help for witness for someone who will believe them when they say something is wrong. And I know exactly what I'm going to say. Speak Up. Foundation. This is Margot. I am listening. January returns to Chicago with snow sweeping the same diagonal pattern as 2 years ago. I walk through Northwestern Memorial's automatic doors again. But this time, I am not here for my father. I am here for someone else's mother. The elevator climbs to the 4th floor. Same mechanical hum. Same yellow fluorescent light pressing down on the same linoleum corridor. When the doors open, I step into the hallway. I first walked in January 2023. Convinced I was completely alone. I was not alone. Someone was watching. I passed the nurse's station. Past the waiting area. Past room 428. Where my father lay motionless while I learned the shape of conspiracy and discovered what 5 years of silence had cost me. Room 412 has a different name on the door now. Different patient. Same light. Same hum. Same place where Iris Peaton spent her final months watching strangers in the corridor and deciding one January morning to leave a letter for a woman she would never meet. I pause outside the door. Look through the glass pane. One silent beat. Then I continue walking. Behind me. Wheelchair wheels click softly against linoleum. An elderly woman rolls past oxygen tank hospital gown. The particular stillness of someone who has made peace with waiting. We exchange a nod without words. She does not know who I am. I do not know her name. But we see each other. I step into room 419. The woman sitting on the mattress edge is 78 years old. Her son drained her accounts over 18 months. Refinanced her house without her knowledge. Convinced her she was too confused to manage her own finances. She holds a stack of legal notices in both hands. Eyes red. Her entire body carrying the exhaustion of being betrayed by someone she raised from nothing. I pull a chair close to the bed and take out my notepad. Tell me everything. I say softly. Start from the beginning. I have time. I am listening. 2 years ago. I stood in this hallway convinced I was alone in what was happening to me. I was not. Someone was watching. Someone saw the architecture of my body when my husband touched my shoulder. The way I went careful and contained the way I tried to take up less space and she left instructions. I did not tell this story to warn you about men like Desmond. I told it so you would remember the woman in room 412. Iris Peaton never learned my name. She called me the girl with the brown hair. She died 3 weeks before I came back with white lies peacefully in her sleep. Knowing only that the trial had started. Knowing it was done. I keep her letter in my top drawer. Single sheet of lined paper. Careful script despite the tremor in her hands. Signed with one letter G. The Speak Up Foundation office sits 3 blocks from this hospital in River North. No name on the door. Just a white card on the brick wall that reads, "Sometimes the person who loves you best is someone you have not met yet." Smaller print beneath Speak Up. Even if it is none of your business. Just speak. That cold voice in your stomach. The one he calls insecurity. Paranoia. Oversensitivity. That is not weakness. That is instinct keeping you alive. Trust it. And if you ever see someone standing in a hospital corridor with those eyes, the ones that have not yet learned to look at the floor, you know exactly what to do. Speak up. Even if it is none of your business. Especially then. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The person who saves your life might be someone you've never met. And the person who destroys it might be someone you love. I spent 5 years ignoring that cold voice in my stomach because I thought love meant trust without question. Don't make my mistake. When someone tracks your every move, edits your words, isolates you from people who care, that's not love. That's control. And when family conspires against you, don't be ashamed of your trust. Be clear about their betrayal. Some might think this story is about family revenge. My uncle and husband both got what they deserved. But it's not about revenge. It's about speaking up before it's too late. It's about being the stranger in the hospital corridor who says something even when it's none of your business. Iris Peaton saved my life with a single letter. And I believe God put her in that hallway for a reason. Not for family revenge. But for witness. For intervention. For the kind of love that asks nothing in return except that you pass it forward. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had someone speak up for you when you needed it most? Please share this story with anyone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Her Revenge for more stories about survival justice and finding your voice again. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements woven with real experiences to strengthen its message. What matters most is the lesson. Speak up even when it's none of your business.